Everyone thinks being polite is universal, until you accidentally insult an entire Japanese immigration department with what you thought was a respectful handshake and nearly miss your connecting flight because of a cultural misunderstanding that could have been avoided with 5 minutes of preparation. Here's what nobody tells you about Japan. It's not just about learning different customs. It's about understanding that your normal, well-intentioned American behavior can be interpreted as rude, threatening, or just plain bizarre. The cultural gap is wider than you think, and the mistakes are easier to make than you'd imagine. Today I'm sharing the 8 cultural landmines I stepped on during my first week in Japan, plus the simple preparation that could have saved me from looking like an uncultured tourist at every turn. Mistake 1. The Great Handshake Disaster. Picture this. I'm standing in the immigration line at Narita Airport, feeling pretty confident about my first trip to Japan. When the immigration officer handed me back my passport, I did what felt natural. I reached out for a hearty handshake and said, "Thank you so much," in my outdoor voice. The officer recoiled like I'd offered him a live snake. The people behind me started staring, and suddenly I'm being escorted to a secondary inspection area for what turned into a very uncomfortable 45-minute conversation about my unusual behavior. Handshakes, high fives, hugs, and kisses are far less common as forms of greeting, and people have different comfort levels with physical intimacy. What I thought was being friendly and appreciative, the officer interpreted as overly familiar and inappropriate for the formal setting. The secondary screening wasn't because they suspected me of anything illegal. It was because my behavior was so far outside normal cultural bounds that they needed to figure out what was wrong with me. As a guest in the country, you're more likely to be bowed at rather than expected to bow, but showing respect with a small bow alongside your arigato is appreciated. The key is reading the room. If someone bows to you, don't grab their hand. Bow back. My fix now. I watch for social cues. If someone extends their hand, I'll shake it. If they bow, I bow back. When in doubt, a polite nod works wonders. It's not about becoming Japanese. It's about not being that American who makes everyone uncomfortable. Mistake 2. The shoe disaster at my ryokan. Nothing quite prepares you for the complexity of shoe etiquette in Japan until you're standing in a traditional ryokan entrance, holding your luggage, and realizing you have absolutely no idea what to do with your feet. The protocol is to remove shoes in the entrance area and slip on indoor slippers provided, then neatly place shoes in the shoebox or to the side out of the way. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. I removed my shoes and immediately walked onto the tatami mats, wearing the provided slippers. The staff member who rushed over looked mortified. You must remove slippers when on tatami mats, and there are separate bathroom slippers you change into for the restroom. So the dance goes. Outdoor shoes off, indoor slippers on, slippers off for tatami, special slippers on for bathroom, special slippers off when leaving bathroom, indoor slippers back on until you reach tatami, then barefoot again. I spent my first night tiptoeing around like I was disarming a bomb. The staff was incredibly polite about my confusion, but I could tell they were silently wondering how someone could reach adulthood without understanding basic footwear logistics. Mistake 3. The restaurant money fumble. American tipping culture prepared me for exactly none of what happened when I tried to pay for dinner at a small Tokyo restaurant. I had cash ready, knew the amount, felt prepared. Then I tried to tip. Tipping is not common in Japan because Japanese culture is rooted in dignity and hard work. Good service represents the standard, and tipping for the standard is viewed as unnecessary. When I left extra money on the table, the server literally chased me down the street to return my forgotten cash. That awkward sidewalk conversation, conducted entirely through Google Translate, taught me that my generous American gesture was actually insulting their professional pride. I was essentially saying their service wasn't naturally excellent. It needed to be bribed. The money handling etiquette goes deeper than just no tipping. Many places use small trays for cash transactions instead of handing money directly. I spent 3 days wondering why cashiers kept pointing at little dishes until I realized they weren't being unfriendly. They were following proper money handling protocols. Mistake 4. The chopstick catastrophe. I thought I was chopstick competent after years of sushi dinners back home. I was not prepared for the minefield of chopstick taboos that could turn an innocent meal into a cultural horror show. There are specific taboo actions with chopsticks that have names. Sticking chopsticks upright in rice resembles funeral incense and is considered very bad luck. I did this at lunch on day 2, and the silence at nearby tables was deafening. Passing food directly from chopsticks to chopsticks is strongly associated with picking up cremated bones after a funeral and is considered extremely unlucky. I learned this when I tried to share a piece of tempura with my dining companion and watched our server's face go white with horror. Even resting chopsticks across your bowl signals that you're finished eating, which confused servers when I was just taking a break. Hovering chopsticks over dishes suggests indecisiveness and can be impolite. The learning curve was steep, and every mistake felt magnified by the polite but obvious discomfort of people around me. Mistake 5. The transit etiquette disaster. Tokyo's train system is incredibly efficient, and I quickly learned why. Everyone follows the same unspoken rules that I was completely oblivious to. My American transit habits made me stand out like a sore thumb. On trains, keep phones on silent and avoid speaking on them. I took a call on the JR line and got stares that could have melted steel. The silence on Japanese trains is remarkable, and my phone conversation shattered it like a rock through a window. The escalator situation was equally embarrassing. The left side is for standing, and the right side is for walking. I stood on the wrong side during morning rush hour and created a human traffic jam that lasted 3 stops. Business commuters were too polite to say anything, but their frustration was palpable. Even something as simple as eating while walking turned out to be problematic. When buying snacks from stalls, you're expected to stand to the side to eat instead of walking with food. I wandered through Shibuya munching on taiyaki, while locals gave me the kind of looks reserved for people who don't understand basic civilization. Mistake 6. The onsen panic attack. My first visit to an onsen, hot spring, nearly ended before it began because I was unprepared for the cultural and logistical complexity of communal bathing Japanese style. There are basic customs that need to be followed to ensure a hygienic and enjoyable experience for everyone. Step 1. Get completely naked. Step 2. Wash thoroughly before entering any bath. Step 3. Don't bring anything into the water, including towels. I spent 20 minutes in the changing area trying to figure out the protocol, while other bathers politely ignored my obvious confusion. The washing stations had specific procedures I'd never encountered, and I was terrified of contaminating the communal space through ignorance. My small towel was for modesty while walking around, not for getting in the water. The larger towel stayed in the changing area. There were unspoken rules about where to sit, how long to stay, and proper entry-exit procedures that no one explicitly explains because everyone assumes you already know. The experience was ultimately wonderful, but those first 30 minutes felt like navigating a cultural minefield where one wrong move could ruin everyone else's relaxation. Mistake 7. The volume control problem. Americans are loud. I didn't realize how loud until I spent a week in Japan, feeling like I was shouting every time I opened my mouth in public spaces. In general, showing consideration for those around you is paramount in public spaces. My normal conversational volume, which felt perfectly reasonable in American restaurants and shops, was apparently aggressive and disruptive in Japanese settings. Restaurant conversations that would be considered quiet in the US drew stares in Tokyo. My inside voice was still too outside for Japanese standards. Even expressing enthusiasm or surprise at normal American volume levels made people uncomfortable. Blowing your nose in public is looked down upon and can result in disgusted looks. I learned this during allergy season when my normal nose-blowing routine horrified fellow train passengers. Sniffling quietly was preferred over the American approach of just dealing with it loudly and efficiently. Mistake 8. The payment and service confusion. The final cultural disconnect hit me in shops and restaurants where my American service expectations clashed with Japanese efficiency protocols. Customer service is designed to be as efficient as possible, which means sparing servers the frequent check-ins expected at North American restaurants. I kept expecting servers to ask, "How is everything?" and felt ignored when they didn't hover. Waitstaff can be summoned by call button or simply saying "Sumimasen," excuse me. with a directness that some North Americans find surprising. I sat there waiting to make eye contact for 20 minutes before learning I was supposed to actively signal for service. Japanese restaurants can be rigid about modifications due to quality control. Chefs are trained to prepare dishes a certain way and fear that deviation could compromise quality. My request to substitute ingredients was met with polite confusion and gentle refusal that left me wondering if I'd committed some cultural offense. The efficiency extends to payment processing, shop interactions, and even basic transactions that felt impersonal by American standards, but were actually demonstrations of professional respect. The truth about cultural preparation for Japan is that most travel guides focus on temples and transportation, but skip the daily interaction fundamentals that actually determine whether you feel comfortable or constantly confused. Japanese people are incredibly patient with confused tourists. But there's a difference between being forgiven for mistakes and understanding enough cultural context to move through daily life without creating awkward situations every few hours. My week of cultural fumbling taught me that respect in Japan isn't just about good intentions. It's about understanding the systems and protocols that make social interactions smooth for everyone involved. Once I stopped approaching everything through an American lens and started observing Japanese social patterns, the culture became much more navigable. The biggest revelation was that most of these mistakes were easily avoidable with basic cultural awareness, not years of study. Understanding the why behind the customs made them feel logical rather than arbitrary, and respecting the systems made me feel less like an intrusive foreigner and more like a considerate visitor. Which of these mistakes sounds like something you might accidentally do? Have you experienced cultural confusion in other countries, or do you have Japan travel anxiety about making similar blunders? Share your cultural learning experiences in the comments. We all benefit from each other's mistakes and discoveries. If this saved you from potential cultural embarrassment, hit that like button and subscribe to Journey Tips for more international travel preparation that goes beyond the guidebooks. Share this with anyone planning their first Japan trip. A little cultural homework can transform anxiety into confidence. Thanks for learning to navigate Japan respectfully with Journey Tips. Safe travels. And remember that cultural curiosity beats cultural assumptions every time.